Hey, what's up everyone? Today we're taking a look at the all-new Tamron 150-500 for Sony E-Mount. Now you might be noticing that I'm in my precision camera shirt. This is actually my work shirt when I do work in sales at the store. Filming this very last minute, but we definitely wanted to get this content out to you, so let's go through the lens. All right, so we're gonna talk about some of the key specs on this lens. Now, there is a bunch of info that you can read up online, but I do wanna talk about the key specs. Biggest thing is this lens is designed to be very similar to our Sony 1-400 in terms of the size. So it is slightly longer than the 1-400 when closed down all the way compared to it. And then the 2-600 in comparison, it's slightly smaller. So it's got a real nice medium, and that's expected if it's going out to 500mm focal length. The size of it though is, in my opinion, is compact and manageable, especially for the focal length. Our front diameter is gonna be 82mm. Another thing that this lens does offer is vibration control. Now, when you're working with telephoto lenses, it is necessary to have something that does have the vibration control or vibration reduction, whatever you want to call it, because even though your camera has IBIS, it's effectively less aggressive when you are at these telephoto lengths. So that's just one thing to keep in mind that Tamron has in this one, so it's great to have. Now, when I mentioned that this is manageable in size, the weight of this is 60.8 ounces without the lens hood. If you are gonna add the lens hood on, that's gonna add another 5.4 ounces to the weight. So size of it, it's pretty small. I can see myself carrying this for an extended period of time, especially without the monopod. This lens is also offering a moisture resistant construction, and they are putting 9 seals and gaskets throughout the lens to help achieve that. Another thing that we're doing on this lens is it has a fluorine coating on the front end. You see this in majority of their lenses, but what that's helping out with, if you don't know already, is smudging, water resistant, just anything to repel off that front element is really going to help out. Now, I do want to talk about the external features as well. So we are getting a lock button that locks it down when you're at 150mm for your focal length. This is just going to help with barrel creep. So over time, the barrels on these telephoto lenses are, pretty firm. So if you leave it unlocked, it won't come out. But if you do tend to not have that lock over time, it will start to creep. So great feature to have on the lens. We do have a focusing limiter. So this is basically just limiting to either infinity, so like the full spectrum, or you can stop it down to 15 meters. So if I know I'm focusing on something at a far focal distance, you can set it to the 15 meters and beyond, and it's just going to have a little bit easier time telling on what you're focusing on. We have our autofocus manual focus switch. Y'all know what that is already. We have our vibration control on or off, and our last switch we get is vibration control modes. So we have 3 different modes. Mode 1 is just going to be your standard vibration control. Mode 2 is going to be for panning. And then we have VC mode 3. This is called framing priority. Now, if you're used to seeing this in the 150-600, then you are aware that in that DSLR camera, framing priority is only engaged when the shutter is released. This is different in the 150-500 with Sony. Your framing priority is going to be on the entire time that your camera is on. Now, another thing that I do want to talk about is our I don't know what you call it, our zoom ring. Basically, so you have your standard 150-500. If you pull up on it, it will lock it down on the focal length you're at, which is nice. So we do have our lock at 150, but if you do want to lock this down while you're shooting, let's say at 500, then you're able to do that by pulling up on the focus ring, or not the focus ring, on the zoom ring. And then another thing to note on the lens as well on the exterior is, I love that Tamron does this with their lenses. A lot of other companies are starting to do this as well. On our tripod collar, it is going to be Arca Swiss compatible on the bottom. So for a lot of shooters out there with tripods, you already have some that have an Arca Swiss head. You don't have to put a plate on this one. Just drop it into place and then tighten it down. And for those of you wondering about the aperture, well, at 150mm, we're at an f5. At 250, we're at a 5.6. At 400, we're at 6.3, and then 500, 6.7 as well. So if you're wondering what apertures we can be at on this lens, those are what we can be at when we're zoomed. This lens also offers a dual MPU, which stands for a microprocessing unit. And one of those microprocessing units is going to handle the lens system, and also that includes the autofocusing. The other one is going to be handling the vibration control. And what this means to you is that we're just going to get some very precise, very fast autofocusing system. And speaking of the autofocusing system, it is using their VXD motor. So that is their voice coil extreme torque drive. So I had this in a previous video where I explained what this does, but basically it's a newly developed autofocusing system that Tamron has incorporated. And when I tell you that this thing is silent and fast and accurate, I mean that. This thing is insane. Another thing I do want to talk about is our aperture. So this is an f5 to f6.7. Now, there might be a lot of shooters out there saying that this is very low aperture. Now, this is common for lenses at this focal length, unless you want to spend upwards of $12,000. I feel like daytime shooting, even nighttime shooting, if you're shooting with a capable Sony camera, is going to be more than capable to shoot with this. You're going to be able to still annihilate that background. And also, speaking of the background, we have a 7-bladed diaphragm. So if you're shooting at this telephoto length and you just want to completely have a really shallow depth of field, you're still able to achieve that in this lens. Now, another thing that I talked about is if you are maybe shooting in nighttime situations where that 6.7 might be an issue, then I probably wouldn't recommend shooting with the higher megapixel cameras like, an A7R4, because on my personal experience, I've had issues with that on, f2.8s even when it is low light. So in Austin, the sun is coming out, but we did plan for it to be cloudy. So I did bring along the A7 III. This camera's been out for a while, but it's still tried and true. We are here downtown at Zilker Park. Now, it has been raining the past week. That's why we're a little behind on the video. Sun's starting to come out, bunch of dogs out here, people playing sports, and then we might make our way over to the river and film some people kayaking as well. So let's jump right into it. And we are back at the store, and it's time for some final thoughts and what we overall thought of the 150 to 500 Tamron. Overall, I have a new respect for sport photographers. Now, I know that ultimate frisbee isn't like, the most exciting thing, but they're definitely fast moving. Those guys were booking it, catching them, throwing it. Like, it's very difficult. And that was the first time that I shot sports overall. All right, but sports aside, let's get into the lens of what I overall thought about it. So ergonomics, I thought the size was very, very manageable. And this is something that I mentioned in the very beginning. The size of it was great. I like, obviously that I had the Arca Swiss plate on there. I wasn't using a tripod for this shoot, but I could see how that definitely comes in handy. One thing though that kind of was difficult for myself to use was the actual zoom ring. Now the zoom ring was very, very stiff. Now, obviously over time, this is gonna loosen up, so that's a good thing to have it stiff, but right out the box, there were some shots where I was following the people throwing the Frisbees and I'd have to like zoom out really quick or zoom in, and sometimes I'd miss the shot because I just wasn't able to get the range fast enough. And it wasn't always accurate where I wanted to put it, if that makes any sense. What did come in handy though with the zoom ring was actually when you flip it up and have it hold. I can definitely see how this comes in handy in a lot of situations because that zoom ring is not moving. You would have to apply a bunch of pressure once it's flipped up to actually get that to move. So overall, that was great. Now let's talk about the image quality. Optically, I thought it was a fine lens. For the price point of this lens, and the price point is something we'll get to in the very end, I thought that there's nothing out there that can quite compete with this, especially for the focal range. So for you hobbyists out there who are not willing to spend upwards of $2,000 or even go beyond that and spend, you know, $10,000, $12,000. This focal range is plenty, and the optical design of it I thought was fine as well. The bokeh, it might have been just the background, but behind the people that were playing golf, it had some weird bokeh characteristics, and I don't even know how to exactly describe it. More than likely, I think it was the trees behind the subjects, but if you zoom in behind some of the people's heads, it had this very like wavy, non-circular, blurred out background. Very hard to describe, but that's something that I did notice in the lens as well. Autofocus was very, very lightning fast. Now this is something that you can expect with all Tamron lenses with that voice coil extreme torque drive. That thing is super fast, so very, very solid for autofocusing system. But yeah, overall, I think it's a very good lens, especially for the price point, and that is gonna bring me to the price point. This is only retailing for $13.99 US at the time of this video. Now we are taking pre-orders. I am gonna put them in the link down below so you can help support precision camera and video. And it's gonna be available June 10th of 2021. So overall, that was a superb lens. Price point, there's nothing like that out right now that even competes with it. So happy for Tamron to always fill that need for photographers out there who are trying to look a little bit more on the budget-friendly side. So that's gonna bring us to a close on this video. Once again, guys, remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you on our next video.